Little Primer is back-to-back conversations with someone passionate about their work and passionate about someone else's work. Mostly art and mostly Atlanta. I'm your host, Sean Mills. So today we're going to talk with Cara Marie Young. She's an artist and a painter. She works in multiple different types of media, which we're going to talk about. She's also a Kennesaw State University graduate. So, Cara, how do you describe yourself, like, when you meet someone? If you met someone at a party, hi, I'm Cara, I'm an artist, what do you say?
It depends. If I feel comfortable, then I definitely open up and just tell them who I am. I consider myself a mixed media artist. I love painting. Sometimes I'm a painter. I like working with mixed media. And also a teacher. I also identify as a teacher really strongly. Education runs in my family. Mm-hmm. My grandpa was principal, and then his father was principal. My mom was the teacher, and so along the way, I didn't know what I would be. I thought I was going to be a lawyer for the longest time.
Me too.
Until I was like 17, 18, started painting. And that's when I felt like I actually saw myself for the first time. So
Can we unpack that a little bit? So,
yeah.
like, I noticed that you put that on your website as well, that, like, you didn't really start until really late into your adulthood compared to some people. Mm-hmm. So what was the inspiration? Did you, like, see a painting on the wall and, like, heavenly light shot on your face, or how did that?
No, I was actually in the living room of my house working on a still life of an engine. It was the first time that I got to use white colored pencil on black paper. I never imagined what that was like.
What do you mean got to? Like, there was like an assignment? Or?
It was an assignment. It was.
Okay.
This was high school. It was like, here you go. This is, we're going to experiment with, negative, adding, an additive process, but like doing the negative. So starting with white and leaving your paper black so the values are there. And I thought that was interesting. It's almost like I got to sculpt an image using just this white crayon. But in working on that and in seeing it pop out of the page and just sitting in my living room, and my dad was there, I remember, and I turned to him and I was just like, I think I want to do this, like, actually. And he didn't know what that meant. He was just like, I guess she wants to draw, maybe. But
as far as he knows, it could have been a phase.
Right, exactly. I was 17. It was the very beginning. But I felt drawn to my hand being connected to the paper with that one tool. And that was just the first tool that I saw. I came to learn there's a bunch of different things, but I felt drawn to that, drawn to the idea of inventing something, inventing an image on a blank surface. And that evolved too as time went on. So that's really how it started.
Now, I'm definitely glad you got exposed to it when you did, but is that in some ways a failure of the education system that you didn't get hooked earlier? Like, is there like a lack of exposure that, like, if you had been given that white pencil, like when you were in 7th grade, would you have had another?
I don't know. We had art classes.
Oh, it was just for you a moment of epiphany.
For me, yes. I think when I took that class, I needed an art elective. It was necessary to graduate. So I took drawing and paint, or 2D. I think it was either 2D or drawing and painting. And that's when I really had exposure to, color theory, 2D design, learning about art. And I thought, okay, well, I need this to graduate. But in tackling those assignments and being able to be creative and, construct things visually, it started to become like, wow, I really, really like that. I really enjoy that. I don't know how I could use it. And I knew that according to the rest of society, and also from what I've been told, that art couldn't get anywhere. But I guess that was my competitive nature, being like, what if I can? Right. What if I can figure out a way to make it work for my life?
And it kind of seems like, I'll help you brag a little bit, that, like, once you did decide you liked art, that you kind of hit the ground running pretty quickly. You got into the Governor's Honors Program, you got into shows. It seems like it all, like, the hardest part was deciding you were an artist.
I guess. Maybe. But it was actually really funny. I remember being in that class and my teacher being like, okay, we're going to open up submissions for Governor's Honors. And I had these drawings like on 8.5 by 11 computer paper. And I was like, can I put this in my portfolio? Like, I had no idea what art was. But I also thank my teacher because she had faith in me, and she was just one of those educators that, you know, she knew how to make it work. She was born with a deficiency in her hands where they were actually, she had a certain type of arthritis, and this is how her hands were all the time. They were really bent. She'd hold things like this. But her paintings were beautiful. And as a child, you know, she faced a lot of bullying, a lot of rejection, but she also fell in love with painting, almost, I feel like, in a similar way that I did. And in using her hands, which some people thought were worthless, she was able to make art. And she ran with that.
So did that like give you inspiration?
Absolutely.
Like, if she can do this, then
yeah.
What's my excuse, kind of thing?
I felt the same way. I didn't have too many friends in high school growing up. Honestly, I was really alone a lot. But it's only because I didn't feel like I got along with people in some ways. I just was always like, you know, I don't know, maybe I'm weird, maybe I don't know. And then especially when I started doing art, I started dressing in weird ways, you know, wearing feathers in my hair and coloring my hair and wearing different patterns that my mom would be like, I don't know if that goes together. And I still do that. And, you know.
Well, in my experience with you, I've seen people kind of call out your fashion, like saying like, wow, you're so unique. And like, do you have a feeling about that? Like how like the people like digest you in that way, that they're like oh, like that they feel comfortable saying like she's got unique fashion. Like does that bother you? Does that like, do you have
sometimes
an opinion
it makes
on
me
that?
uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine it would.
But it's only because I guess, I don't know, sometimes I struggle with that. Sometimes I struggle with self-worth.
Right.
Sometimes I struggle with the idea of what looks okay.
Well, there's also the weird thing of like, why do some people feel like it's okay to like comment on my clothes? Like, we're all wearing clothes, like, right?
Yeah.
Like that they feel like they were given license just because it deviates from the norm by like 1 degree.
Guess, yeah. But I realize, I don't know, I try not to focus too much on that. And even like in dress, I feel like it's just an extension of my artwork. Only because of how my artwork has evolved in patterns. I feel like a part of me is really uncomfortable with the blank. Which is so funny because when I fell in love with art, it was a blank page, and then it became something different. And seeing that becoming, I think, was more tantalizing. But now, with the materials I'm using, with not just my clothes and stuff, I love patterns. I love a lot of stuff going on, and I love building upon that, figuring out a way to take all of these things and make them unified. That's what
I wanted to talk to you about like how you have used so many different types of media. I don't know if some of them were pit stops, like jewelry. It seems you definitely, books are definitely a big part of your life, that you always have a sketchbook on you. I'll say it this way, if you'll walk with me on this metaphor. So, like, I think there's something, like if you use that metaphor of like falling in love, that like if you fall in love for the first time, one of the scary things is that you realize that you're capable of falling in love. So like, I think you found out in an epiphany that like, oh, art is something and I want to do it. But then that also opens the door that like, could something else occur to you, that like, could you be doing something one day and you're like, oh wait, I like this more? And so for instance, in a very practical way, like if you tried, like if you took an intensive course on printmaking in a particular style.
I
actually
took 2 classes on printmaking.
If you took like a glass course, are any of these things something that could be like, now that's going to be what I do? Or is it they all feed back into the drawing? They feed back.
Yeah. They feed back for sure. I've had an opportunity to work in 3D. I took a jewelry class not too long ago and working in metal. And I love my teacher because she knew that I was a painter. But she told me, you know, when you transfer your painting on the metal, it becomes your artwork. So she helped me to see that all of the characteristics of who I am can also translate in different forms. And so I try to use that to my advantage all the time, whether it be, you know, using books, using text, using research to add to a series, or, you know, even like language, something like that. I love foreign language too. My goal is to learn 7 before I turn 40, and right now I'm conversational in 3 and I'm learning 5. So
it's quite a goal.
It is, I guess. I don't know.
And pretty
Some
rare
people
too.
are like,
Well, it's rare enough for someone to know multiple languages, but then to also be visually aware. And so, like, I feel like there's even a school of thought of some people that think of, well, I'm an artist. I'm specifically, I don't want to explain myself. I'm not a nonverbal person.
Right.
That like I grunt and then I express myself through my painting.
Right.
So that's interesting that you have both halves. Do you think of that as being weird, or is it just like, I'm just me, this is the way I think?
No, sometimes I think it's weird. Sometimes I feel like I have too much going on in my head, and I should decide. Because I feel like all around us, there's always this idea that we should decide. Just being one thing, or just streamlining something. But I can't. The more I'm living, the more I can't do that. The more I have opportunities to teach and work with youth, their lives teach me something. The more I get to learn language and about the different cultures of the world, the more I get to see our world like as a whole in different perspective. And the more that I paint and meet new artists and have new experiences, every gallery experience, everything that way, the more my art evolves. So everything, I don't know, yeah.
Well, I wonder, and this, like, let's just go there as a kind of like pretentious exercise.
Yeah.
That like there could be the idea that you might be desperate to try these things because nothing quite feels right yet, or that there's the idea that maybe if I study Portuguese, maybe if I learn this new language, there'll be a word that explains my thought process better. Like that, like you're hungering for something. You don't even know exactly what you might find, but you know that you're still searching for it. Is that?
No, I feel more so like just the need to understand.
So it's about learning about other people, not yourself.
I mean, in some ways I feel like I get to learn more about myself, but like with every language that I learn, it's almost like math. It is. Like French was my first, well, my first was English, and then French was my second. I've been studying French for almost 10 years. So getting the formula of that language, it's almost like there was a pattern to how French was. And now, even when I speak French now, versus how I'm speaking Spanish, because I'm still a baby in Spanish, it's like I understand the formula, so I don't really have to think about it. It's there. And seeing that pattern, it's almost like, what if there's other patterns in different languages? How can I find that pattern? And so that led me to Italian. French and Italian are very written close together. Audio, Spanish is closer to Italian. But seeing it written, I felt like I could flow into that language easier. And so that's how I found that. And now it's just like, it's kind of addicting. Once you start with one,
absolutely, yeah.
You just can't stop.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Just hearing things and sounds and understanding, like, even with body language. Because like with humans, like even if you don't speak someone else's language, you can understand about them simply by their presence, simply by their body language, with how they react to you, with how they look at you. When you are with their family life, seeing how they are at home, all of that. You can get cues.
Well, since you brought up that idea, can you think of any concrete like moments where, because you studied a different language specifically, like it made you change the way you thought about things? Like after I learned this word in Spanish, it made me think about this differently? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I'll say that with French. I love French so much. It's honestly, I don't want to say like my favorite, because then I don't know if I'll make anyone else mad. But in learning about the structure of how French works, many of the ideas and emotions come first, according to syntax. For example,
right.
If you were going to say, like, in English, using the sky as an example, like, isn't a night without stars sad? Right? You say whatever it is first, and then the emotion comes last.
Right.
But in French, you would be like, isn't it sad, a night without stars? And that's just like a simple sentence, but it helps you to understand that the emotion and the problem, the issue,
right,
the stress comes early, so that you know, and then an explanation of what it actually is, Right. And I connect with that a lot because I feel like in the United States we have some issues expressing ourselves sometimes.
Yeah.
Emotion can be taboo. Like, lots of things can just be taboo, and that's why when we go to Europe and we talk to French people and we're like, oh my gosh, they're so argumentative, oh, they might be so bougie, or oh, they're so nosy, why are they asking me all of these questions? But that's how they are. Desire to get to know you, the desire to understand the other.
Right.
Whereas, especially now with everything that's been happening in our political climate, I feel like there is a sentiment against the other,
Right.
the isolationist mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and also inferiority complex in some ways that's here. And I feel like it inhibits us to not only understand what's happening on the other side of the world, but understand ourselves.
Sure. Well, just to play devil's advocate, isn't there also that aspect that like you're inherently in a more emotional creature, then that also leads you into the potential of giving into those emotions? So like in contemporary politics right now, like a big issue is like the Calais region in France, the Syrian immigrants.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of
big
like
thing right now.
bigotry and a lot of jingoism, and like even going back to like the 1800s, like the French have always been like patriotic in a certain way. So like that's
especially with the World Cup.
Yeah. So like that's all part of the package, right? That it's like that emotion sometimes brings with it negative emotions.
Negative things too, of course.
Well, speaking of which, I've been kind of like circling this, but like, so if you haven't seen Cara's work yet, I've had the pleasure of seeing it, and in addition to being really technically well done and being really literal in some ways, that you can tell exactly like that came from a light source, it came from real life, there's also like a dark subject matter to a lot of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if like that's the way you think of it, but for instance, just as like an easy starting point, I noticed that like you've had like, for instance, the note. The implication is the note is a suicide note, right?
Yeah, that was also an assignment.
Oh, okay. But I mean, like you choose, like was it to make a suicide note, or
it was to make a crime scene or of some kind, and you couldn't. It was a still life, but the still life had to have some malicious intent in it, understanding that there was something else that was actually going on. So I just thought of the idea: what if someone was hanging themselves? And so that note and the boot and the chair that was being tilted was all kind of like building that dramatic suspense. And the monochrome, I think, helped it also make it look really creepy.
But like just thinking about, okay, you had another self-portrait, I don't know if it was an assignment, but called Mask. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
So like the idea of titling a self-portrait Mask, like that doesn't, for me, that has a connotation of like that there is some sort of negative associations with that. Was that your standpoint?
Yes. Trying to think. This was at the beginning of my advanced painting in college, and so I really wanted to create a body of work that was all about the Oreo in American society. So the Black American who has been labeled white because of their lifestyle, maybe how they talk, maybe how they dress, but someone who's rejected by the Black community. But also,
you're punished for assimilating.
There's a glass ceiling, like the color of my skin, I'm obviously not white.
Right.
So there's this disconnect. And they're kind of left in this in-between, and you don't really know their identity, or at least some people might not desire to. And so I was trying to figure out different ways of visually depicting that, and at first I thought, okay, what if we use color, and we had this mask, this white mask on me and all of these things, but it was a little bit too confusing because I felt like all the elements that I had were so all over the place. So that led me to the painting of Alex, the one that is titled Unworthy. I don't know if you've seen that. She has black on her face.
Yeah.
And the white roses that are also painted black, kind of reminding me of Alice. But the idea of being painted black, being unclean, being unworthy of being beautiful because of the idea or the standard that's been set. So by limiting the color to just black and flesh tone and white and playing with those, it was, I think, easier to begin to see and figure out how to depict, those things. So the mask painting was the start of it, but I don't know, that was a really interesting painting. It was a fun part of my life, I don't know. So,
like, we sort of started getting into it already, but so something that you claim in your artist statement is that racial themes is like something your artwork is about. So do you feel like that is like inextricable from like so for instance, I've seen like more studios type study work where like you did like a study of sculpture or something that is inherently sort of it's an academic exercise in the sense that it's sort of divorced from a context. But then most of your work is very like you said, this Oreo experience that it comes from a very specific perspective. So for you, do those things could they never dissolve? Like, is it not painting if it's not telling a story?
That's a great question, honestly. And no, I think a painting can still be a painting if it doesn't have a story or a necessary meaning behind it. I'm actually at the place right now where I'm trying to detach myself more from the physical of my pieces and like the ones on the cutting boards and stuff, just painting things and then destroying it. The idea of that, just because I feel like sometimes in the past I've put such a heavy emphasis on what something might have to mean or what have to be, but when someone looks at a painting, they interpret it the way that only they can. So that meaning might change. I'm not going to be there all the time to explain for my work, like I'm talking to you.
Sure.
So
that reading can change.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, so sequentially, your work where you portrayed portraits of individuals with plant life from their homeland, is that sequentially more recent than the schoolwork?
That was done last year, last fall.
Yeah. So if I were to try to generate a narrative, and you can kind of correct it if it's wrong, it sort of seems like that would be like a nice or interesting progression where it's like, okay, I am interested in origins, I'm interested in experience, I'm interested in the meaning of race, but then you're also thinking it doesn't always have to be my story that I'm telling, that it's like you're using your unique perspective to help pick your subjects, but it's not always just going to be about your specific experiences. Is that fair, or is it like, how did that come about?
I'm trying to think very first. So I think the mushroom, actually I don't remember which one was the first one. Actually I think Alex might have been. But no, in studying plants more and just the origins of how our forests have developed because of invasive species, things that were brought, other things like that, I realized that the earth, like our forests are societies of their own, And I started to see each of those plant species or types as, different strands, not just necessarily different races, but different people. They do have an origin. Plants have origins, just like humans have origins.
Sure.
So in researching those origins more, I started to, consider the idea, what if, these plants could personify these people, since they are of the same homeland, right? So then that led to doing portraits and just poses of people with those plants, almost like the plants are them in a way, but also not, I don't know how to really explain it.
Well, that's a fine explanation, but just to be like really didactic, I'm wondering if you could also walk me through, like, did the idea for the whole thing come at once? Did it, like, was there inspiration to do one and then you're like, oh, there should be a series? Do you remember that perspective?
Yeah, I was taking a directed study class with a professor. So I had to just pop out 2 paintings a week, and then I was like, okay, let's pick a theme, let's go. And so I looked at all these plants. I looked at a lot of the individuals that I knew who were not either native to this country or they had, external heritage, and just interviewing them, asking them about their journey, asking them, how they got to America, do they feel American since they got here, and also I found that with how some plants were brought over and adapted, the humans have also adapted in different ways. Like, for example, the painting of my friend Agata, she's from Russia. She grew up during the USSR period. And she came over when she was really young. She kind of like got exiled a little bit, and her family, rejected her. So when she came here, she felt like she was free, but our idea of Russian culture has also like been warped because of some stuff. So she faced a lot of rejection there too. So in having to adapt, I started researching different Russian plants, and there's the black currant fruit. It's actually illegal to grow in some parts of the states just because of the idea You know, knowing that it's from Russia, knowing the period that it's used to make a really strong vodka. But most farmers and some people don't like allow that plant to be planted because it's like, you know, we don't want that plant here. They kind of have a distaste for it because of the distaste towards Russian culture.
Right.
And it's really sad. So, and then having her explain that to me, you know, I felt a connection there. So I wanted to paint her in black, being that fruit that is still a blossom, that's still, you know, she's living her life, she's doing her paintings and raising a family and enjoying the world and all of this. And I don't know, I feel like it's just, it's really admirable and it's important to know about because many people don't think about, you know, other cultures maybe. How they came to be, the stuff that they went through, and also how some of our perceptions and idiosyncrasies against them are just programmed and not actually true.
Right. Well, when you brought up during talking about the plant heritage that you had this obligation to create X number of works within like a class setting, I know just from noticing the activity on your Instagram that even outside of a class assignment, you are prolific, that you work constantly, that I think that you have a compulsive desire, like that it's like that you have
OCD.
to.
I'm actually really OCD.
Okay, so literally, not just like in like a diagnosis.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
No, yeah.
So like, does that like, is that a kind of therapy? Is it like that it hurts if you don't do it? Like, could you explain that?
Sometimes it does. Because it's just like when I guess have a desire to paint, or maybe, I don't know, it's grown, it's changed. I feel like the only way that I can actually understand what I'm doing is if I see those images on a surface. It's like I put myself on a surface, right? Like whether it's in a series of work or not. The only way I actually know what's changing is if I can see it. So I constantly feel like I have to do. This is who I am. I'm an artist. I'm a painter. If I'm not painting, am I a painter?
Right.
You know, if I'm not doing it, am I art? Am I an artist?
Sure.
And how fair is that for another artist who is working, who's living art, who's showing their work, and then for me to, you know, not do anything? I don't know.
Well, there's like the self-consciousness of an artist that like, you know, lots of artists have the sort of feeling of inadequacy that they're an imposter, the imposter syndrome idea. But then there's also the other thing where I'll just share my experience that I've talked to artists before and they're like, well, I'm like, so what are you working on? It's like, well, I've been kind of busy, I haven't done anything in the last 3 months. And for me, it's like, that doesn't register. That it's like that I have to be touching the canvas. And
same.
so even if it's just to sketch, like it doesn't. I crave it, right?
I mean, yes, I feel the same way. Like I understand sometimes not being able to sketch all the time because I try to do as much as I can in my books. But at the end of every year, there's always a little bit of space that's left, and I like that in a morbid sense because I know that I'm going to be dead one day.
Right.
One day these hands aren't going to move anymore. So, in that respect, you know,
like
there's always going to be more that I want to do, but I can't.
I don't know if like, are you just being poetic, or do you really have that sense?
No,
of, like,
I have that sense.
I know that like I might, if I make a painting every day of my life, there are only X number of paintings that like the sand's running out of the hourglass. Do you feel that? Or
Sometimes I do, because it's like if I want to progress, if I want my artwork to grow, and you know, just to understand more, I feel like I have to be making, because not everyone has that opportunity.
Right.
You know, some people can't. Actually, I think about that. I think about those people who can't use their appendages, who might not even have them. I think of those other artists who also, you know, draw and paint using other extremities, using their feet, using their mouth. I think about that. And if it's what I believe to be true of my existence, my purpose, and calling, what have you, maybe I have to be doing it.
Well, I guess like it's like a philosophical point that you could say, I had a teacher, a great teacher, who taught me that she didn't have full use of her hands, so I should make full use of my hands because I can appreciate it. Right. But then there's the flip side to say that even without hands, she was able to teach me. So you could say to yourself, well, even if I lost my hands tomorrow, I might become an amazing teacher of language, like that, like fate might take me in different directions. Like, does that help you, or is that more like, that makes me even more scared of losing my hands?
No, I used to actually be afraid of having my
Oh.
right hand cut off.
Wow.
It was like a phobia for like a
Yeah.
year, 3. Like it would be
What
really
would I
very,
do without it?
Yeah, exactly. Can't do anything. But then I
Mhm.
realized, this is what I am.
Okay. Well, okay, so one kind of big theme that I was kind of curious at your take on it is that when we have nightmares, one of the ways that people think nightmares are useful is that they kind of act as like a little bit of a testing ground. And it's like, what would I do if that really happened? And I already tested that in my nightmare, that I know if the murderer is coming at me with an axe, that I'm going to go to the car and not into the closet. So do you consider like the sort of nightmarish or like the violent imagery in your artwork, do you consider that like that you're exercising it from you, or that it's like a documentation of your feelings, or what is that?
Definitely document. I don't know if anything's changing.
Like it doesn't seem to make you feel better to get it out.
I mean, it's kind of hard because
Sure.
nothing is ever out the way that I want it to be out. I'm constantly really critical.
Right.
And when I start something, when I finish something, it's never with my original intention. So then you could argue, like, did you ever really release it?
Sure.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
But it's an experience. I feel like each of my artworks do teach me something. Every study, even, to help me to see something new. It might not necessarily change me, but again, it's a documentation of that progression. I can see those thoughts, and at least when they're there, I can try to organize them in whatever way.
Mm-hmm.
But then this other bystander could also organize them in a completely different way. So it's hard to like communicate. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. Like the whole point of, I think, one of the big points of art is that it is its own form of communication. And just like one of the first things you learn language, I think, if you have a good teacher, is that they tell you it's not a code of English. When you
Right.
learn bonjour, that doesn't mean hello in French. It means good day, and it means and all its other things.
It's true, good morning.
It could mean
They
good
don't have a
morning.
good morning, so-
Right. So it's like, it is untranslatable in a sense that,
Yeah.
and that's the way I think visual art can be too, is that it's like, sure, you can have a concept and maybe some people are better than others at explaining a process, but that at the end of the day, it is its own form of communication as well. Now, to bring us back to secular time, I think that you have a show coming up at the Art Place in August. Is that
Here,
correct?
our show.
Yeah.
Are you
so,
to it? Yeah.
so what is that show, and what is the work you're putting
The
in?
Steal It show?
Yeah, you want to talk about
so
that?
we're having a show. It's called Steal It. All of the artworks are $50 and under, and I'm showing some quick studies.
Oh, okay. So like, no, I mean, I think that's interesting too. That like, when you're a person who shows, that like there could be different types of things you show.
Yeah.
Like, so for instance, tonight.
Like prints or.
Sure, and also like different parts of your process. So like,
Mm-hmm.
I have a show that I'm gonna be after we get talking at the Abernathy Art Center. It's a pin it show, where you basically just anyone can pin up artwork, and so like that.
That's right. That's still going on?
Yeah, tonight's the reception.
Oh.
Yeah, so like for me, I think it's interesting too, at least maybe at this point in our career, maybe mid-career you could call it, is that like when you're first starting out, you think like, oh, I'm gonna like get into my studio, make a bunch of work for that show and put it
Right.
up, and it becomes actually, you realize that it's like some stuff you might make in a day, some stuff you
might
make for a show,
yeah.
some things you value more. Like, do you have in your like studio practice, like where you are right now, are you trying to build a body of work to present to galleries? Are you
I'm
kind of
trying to
letting
build a body
experiment?
of work to understand myself.
Okay.
And to also find a solid thesis for a possible MFA program. I've
Okay.
been researching for that, shopping for schools, but I don't want to go in not having an intention.
Yeah.
I want to have an intention.
Right.
And the only way I can find that is to make.
Well,
So
thank you
that's why
for being
I'm-
that candid about it.
Yeah.
From people I've heard that had enjoyed their graduate experience, they've all said that like, come when you know the work you want to get done.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to go there to figure yourself out. Like,
I mean, you still do, though.
Right.
You know, from my experience and also talking with professors, when you go, the school, the professors, the artwork that they kind of culture, all comes a part of you too, and you change and you grow and you evolve.
Mhm.
So I know that when I start, I don't know what I might look like when I come out. I don't know what my work might look like when I come out. but I want to have an intent and an idea maybe of what it could be, and then letting the environment shape it into reality. I feel like that's pretty much how it works. I'm not going to get a piece of paper. I don't want to just go to be able to teach at a college level. I would like to go so that my artwork can also continue to evolve too. There's also this other really big thing going on right now. Have you heard of the Bennett Prize? The Bennett? No? Okay, so it's an ongoing submissions right now from April to September, and it's specifically for female figurative realist painters that are not in school and not discovered, not
And have you like followed previous winners? Or?
Yes, and looking at just like some of their work, which is all really, really, really great, but you pretty much need like, I think, like 30 images or 30 pieces, I guess, from this year or within the past like few months with a statement of intent and like all of that, and it's an opportunity to possibly show in Michigan and then tour the country and speak to people, and I think that would be fun, but I've been looking for opportunities like that.
Well, I had my own white whale. It was the Rome Prize, and it was like you study in Rome, and the reason I even heard about it was because a hero of mine, George Nelson, won it, and it was like that level of elementary that it's like, my hero won it, I want to try to win it.
That's awesome.
And,
did you get to do that?
I didn't win, but the process of trying to get it was super impactful in my life.
Yeah.
That it's like that, even if it's not that, and like I don't want to be that cliche, but it's like you make this concerted body of work for the Bennett Prize, and you maybe like the third painting you do like makes a series that a gallery like 3 years from now. Like,
right. I mean, I'm not really trying to make a specific series. I'm just trying to make.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And then when I get there, I'll be like, okay, who's going?
Well, I think these targets really do shape me. Like, I don't know if that like just by reaching, it makes you grow in ways that you weren't expecting.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I'm realizing, and also like hungering for too. Like being able to set those goals, have those targets, continually be producing, continually just making new stuff. I don't know. I never want to stop doing art. And it's sad because before painting was hard. Like after high school, getting into college and being like, oh, so this is figure painting. So maybe my goal should be just to render this realistically and stress about the technical. And then it shifted into, okay, well, maybe now everything has to have a meaning. Everything has to have a reason. And now it's shifting to understanding, like, you know, this is my language too. There are all these ideas. I can streamline it if I want to, but the only way I'm going to see, you know, and also progress is to continually do. It doesn't have to have a meaning all the time. Now when I go into a painting, like, I can have an intention, I can make a sketch, but I'm not going to beat myself up as to say, wow, this doesn't represent, you know, femininity anymore. It looks something completely different. I let the artwork decide. So, yeah.
That's a great encapsulation, I think, of what we've been talking about. Is there anything that in your history, your career, works of art that like I haven't, like, that I left out and you feel like you would want to mention?
I don't know. It's an ongoing train, so.
Not that you noticed. Well, let me give you this then as like a little bit of a capper. I noticed that you had a digital painting. Was it called Fairest? Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know like if that was a labor of love or not, but I thought of it as being remarkably talented because I personally have found that trying to translate hand skills from physical media to digital is extremely hard. So like, what is your process with that? Or like, is that something you would go back to? Is that something?
Yes, I wish I had the software. I plan on saving up for it. I love painting digitally. And the sad thing is nowadays is that we can mimic so many brushstrokes and textures that we can make a digital painting look like a real one. And that's just how far graphic design and all of that it's heading. But I like it. I find it easier. I can do it faster, like way faster. That painting only took like 8 hours. So with different brush textures and layering, but you know, just 2 or 3 class sessions. So that was that painting.
So you did feel like you took to it. It didn't feel like, there's a lot of artists I feel like they say that it's like, that they feel like their hands are tied, and that it's like they're trying to like, that they're using a different muscle almost. But it
you just have to change, I guess just changing how you like, the brush pen, whether you're using a Cintiq or a tablet or whatever, just translating that, I don't know. It felt really cool. Just being able to click and change the texture of my brush. All my colors are there. You know, it's like painting, but like in a dream world, because it's on a computer. If I want to back up, I can erase. If I do this on wood, I can't pick up that oil. It's there.
Right.
I have to paint on top or push it around or make it, you know. You can also layer things, have separate layers, do something in black and white, do something in color. Like, there's so many options. But I don't necessarily love it more than traditional work. I do like working with my hands because I feel like just having a human touch too, it can be nice.
Yeah, like not to belabor that point, but I find it extremely interesting that you appreciate digital art because it seems like so much of your work enjoys the inherent qualities of the materials. So like having like an inherent texture to like text from a book, or having like the grain of the wood, or having like you have all these things.
But then I think that's also me being paranoid of the empty space because I don't like it.
Interesting.
I don't like working like now. If I had to start a painting on a white canvas, I think I would not want to. I'd want to put something down, whether it's a wash of color or a few pieces of paper. I don't like working on anything blank anymore. Yeah. Ever. It kind of scares me.
Like you want something to react to, or that it's like an affront to see something so pristine?
It just doesn't feel real. Like, it doesn't feel like, I don't know. But maybe that's just me being too rough or like renegade painter, I don't know. But I feel like humans have an intrinsic quality about them, like physical, like even touch, hair, color, skin, age, wrinkles. There's so many qualities that make us human. Like, it's not like looking at people in a magazine. You know that those people like are photoshopped. They have makeup. That's how I see white canvas, which is weird because maybe those are two different things. But when I work on a surface that's used, I feel closer to it because it feels more like me.
Interesting. Yeah.
You know?
Right. Well, I guess like that we've accidentally stumbled on a really rich, separate kind of idea, but that's like that goes into like Lacan psychology, the idea that human beings are always looking for the veil, like that it's like it doesn't seem real if it's like this. There's something wrong about it. It's too easy. That you're looking for like what's the catch? What's behind what I'm seeing?
It's true, and also like what is beautiful in terms of art. You know, what is fine art? Does it have to be on a canvas? Can it be on the ground? Can it be in a subway wall? Yeah. Like, I like the idea of taking something that's not known as perfect, as beautiful, as fine, and making it attractive. Making it so that, you know, you don't know what it is. Like, is this paper? Is it wood? Is it paint? Is it all of the above? Maybe. But it's like the artwork becomes alive. Yeah. Because it's not just on a 2D plane. I see drawing and painting, you know, creating an image on a flat surface. You're building almost like a world there. But, like, I feel like that world can become more real when there's elements that are tangible, like even, that's why I love fibers. I don't know if you saw the fiber show that was here not too long ago with Virginia. Oh my gosh, she's so good. She does these huge tapestries, but her process in talking about touch, like as humans, like we want that tangible, like feeling, like even how when we're babies and we're swaddled in fabric and like we react to touch, we react to fabric, we react to like fibers and how something looks, and I just feel like that's an important part of what we have. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just not making sense.
No, it makes sense. I keep on trying to play the other side of it and say that, do you think there could ever be a time, do you speculate that there could be a moment in your process or your eye as an artist, and to see something naked, to see something blank, to see raw canvas and think, this is authentic too, that you wouldn't be scared of a big white canvas? Like, do you think do you see that, like, that'll come in time, or do you think, I don't see in myself that yet?
Yeah, maybe not yet. I mean, I've been recently imagining the idea of painting things on canvas again, but destroying the canvas somehow, like cutting it, piercing it, doing something that breaks the image like into the real world. Because I don't know if I feel like it's a personal problem.
Well,
personal phobia or yeah.
I mean, that's totally valid that you don't necessarily have to know how you're going to grow.
Yeah.
But you might think that you don't need to. That's you're happy with the way you're seeing things too. Like.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I'll find new mediums to paint with in time. I don't know what surface I'll be working on, or honestly, I really want to try to make a piece out of paper. Like. That's what I've been drawn to, because with how I've been working with paper, I've been kind of cutting it like the strokes themselves. So it's like, why do I need paint? You know what I mean? Yeah. I could just use that. There's so many options.
Well, to give you like a little bit of a historical example of someone in a similar situation, maybe there was this talk about Pablo Picasso being its innovator, right? That he was like a vanguard of modern painting, where he was recontextualizing the way imagery was made. And towards the end of his career, people were kind of writing him off as being like, oh, he's kind of like, he had his run, he made the Cubist thing, and now he's done. But now, even now today, people are re-looking at what he was doing right before he died, which was to make these kind of like large ceramic pieces that kind of were like ready-mades in a way. They kind of prefigured many ready-mades. And so I think like, at that time, even though the world saw him as an innovator, they were thinking like, oh, like that's too much. He's lost it. And so I guess the lesson I'm trying to say, or like the anecdote I'm trying to correlate, is the idea that like it's not, you don't get there. That it's like if you live to be 80, you'll be exploring something different too. And that if you live to be 200 because of science, like you could be inscribing a different type of hollow cube. Like that there isn't a success. It's like a journey thing, and it's as many different possibilities as cross my path, I will try to make art out of them and on them and about them.
Yeah. Yes. No, I agree. I mean, I feel that, and I don't know. Life is uncertain and not promised.
For sure. We could lose our hands tomorrow.
Yeah, man.
Well, do you have anything you'd want to plug? Do you want to say your website or your Instagram? Where would you want people to follow you?
You can find me on Instagram at Cara Marie Young. That's my name. And there's a link there for my website, because there's a hyphen in it, and I don't want it to be complicated, so it's cara-marieyoung.com. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the show notes too. So thank you so much for talking to me, Cara.
Thank you, Sean. You're awesome.
Find more information at doubleprimer.com.